Hello and welcome to the This Works For Me Virtual Summit. I'm your host, Fermpate Watson. I am the director of the Faculty Development Center at Murray State University. I am looking forward to this conversation today because our guest, Dr. Debra Ferdinand-James, will be showing us how we can integrate sample scripts and templates into our assessments to actually improve our students' performance. Dr. Ferdinand-James, welcome.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
Yes, and I'm very pleased that you are taking the time to share with us today. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you're from, and what you do?
Sure. I'm Debra Ferdinand-James, and I am an educational technologist at the School of Education, the St. Augustine campus of the University of the West Indies, Trinidad and Tobago. I teach both graduate and undergraduate students technology-related courses. My research interests includes mixed methods, blended learning, and Industry 4.2. I also have over 20 years of experience in post-secondary education, and I'm very happy to be sharing with you.
Great. Dr. Ferdinand James, could you give us an idea of what got you interested in using these sample scripts and templates?
Sure. I usually teach a summer course in instructional design. That would be semester 3 for us, summer for you. And in that course, we have coursework with 30% and a final assessment with 70%. So when I got back my first assignment, which was worth 10% of the course mark, about 2 or 3 weeks into the course, by the third week, I was a bit taken aback that the responses I saw on the students' submissions were not in direct response to questions asked. The responses were either too long or too short or missed some key information. And so I decided to ask for a resubmission because I felt if I graded it the way it was, um, the students would not have done very well. And when students are coming into a course, they're new to the information. You want them to get off to a good start. So it would not have been nice for them to get, not very favorable results for the very first coursework assignment. And that's when I remember when I was a PhD student, very green, a novice to research, I depended very much on Professor John Cresswell's research design text because he used a number of sample scripts in there
Oh,
that would help the novice researcher to write and guide their the different parts of their research proposal, the problem statement, the purpose statement, the research question. So I immediately went into the text. And I can share my screen to show you what a sample script looked like and where I borrowed the strategy from. So for example, as a new PhD, as you can see here, this is one of his sample scripts for a purpose statement. And how thankful I was for this script because it's my first purpose statement. I'm now learning the field, I'm now learning the jargon. And I was able to write what was expected, use the specific terms that relate to my research study. So you see here, he says, the purpose of this, and he puts a dash, and then in brackets, he gives you the option so that you can put the type of research that you're doing. If it's a case study, then you put that and you take out that the rest of the information is, study is, and since I was now doing my proposal, I would use the future tense, so it will be, because I did not complete my research. Two, and then you choose the appropriate verb that relates to or describe the type of research that you're doing, and so on. So I said to myself, I was once in this position, and this approach eased me into, the research. I was able to feel confident that what I was writing is what was required. And so I got off to, a very pleasant start in doing what is required. And so I decided to borrow that strategy to help my new undergraduate students who are doing instructional design for the first time in their first year. Yeah.
Wow. So, what would you say to someone who thinks that you are spoon feeding your students or you're stifling their ability to think critically? Because look at all these fill in the blank sections, and what would you say to someone who think you're spoon feeding your students?
Well, I would not say at this stage because they're very new to the field and they need to be able to digest the information in chunks, get familiar with the different terms and definitions and concepts in chunks. And so at this level, it's really the lower order thinking skill. And remember, I used this when I was at that level, at the graduate stage level. So I would say you would not use this, for right through your entire course. This would be
Mhm.
at the beginning of the course to
I see.
ease students into the course so that they can feel comfortable, they are understanding, they know what is required. And then you move on from there once they have a good foundation of the concepts and the terms and the definitions and so on. They'll be able to build on that and think critically and use that later on in the course when they move on to higher order thinking.
Mm. Wow. Well, thank you very much for showing us an example of the templates that really inspired you to start using template and scripts in your course. Would you be able to show us an example of one that you have actually used in your course?
Sure. So let me just give a little review first or preview. So the situation is I got my first batch of submissions for the very first part of the lesson plan, where the students have to identify an instructional problem, state it briefly, and then link it to an instructional goal in the curriculum.
Okay.
And I did give them a template, just a short template as to what I wanted. So this is what I'll share with you now and explain why I resorted to the sample script.
Mhm.
Okay, so this is the template that I provided for the students for their instructional problem. And it's done in a peer review. So after they write the instructional problem, they would then pass it to a peer for the peer to review and give comments as to whether or not it meets all the requirements for a problem statement. So the upper part here is what I had initially. I just had this in the template. So I said here in brackets, this is what they have to write. At least two paragraphs giving a summary description of the instructional problem. And that would be the frequency of it. That would include the number of students and the level of students, the observed learner behaviors slash disposition, etc. But what I got was, sort of a description, but with a lot of extra words and descriptions that took away from the essence of the problem. So instead of just sticking to, what I have here, and being specific and concise. Students went on a lot to describe a lot more about the students, their experiences, and so I thought I needed to borrow that sample script approach to help to focus their writing. So this is what I did
Mhm.
in the bottom here. I did explain to the students that I would not be grading the first submission as it is. I asked for a resubmission, and then I explained to them I'm providing them with these sample scripts to help them. It's not that they have to use it, but I'm providing it to help to guide them to give more direct responses and to help them become familiar with the terms and the jargon that they need to use when they're talking about a problem statement. So I observed that and I put a dash and then in brackets I said you have to give the level of students and the number. So sometimes what I would get previously is just that students were and they would not give me the level. And of course, if you're doing a lesson plan, you have to know the level of the students you're targeting so that you are not, teaching above or below that level, but at that level, and so on. And then I have were, and again in brackets, I say briefly describe the potential impact of the problem on students' learning. Then I went on to say the classroom environment. Of course, that is a very important aspect of teaching. If you don't have the right environment and resources and so on, students are not going to be able to focus and be comfortable in learning what they have to do, and and so on. So this is how I modified what John Cresswell did in his research design text for my purpose, and it worked. It worked well for the students.
So thank you for sharing that. So let me ask you, how is this approach different from just providing examples to students, or could it be complemented with examples? For example, of the problem statement.
Now, the examples could complement it, I would say, but sometimes students are tempted to just, copy the situation in the example, if you know what I mean.
Mm.
And so they would just, pick a problem and just say, well, this too is my problem, and just slightly modify the example. But in this way, they actually have to identify the problem in their classroom,
Mm.
with the students, with the environment, the gap, and so on. And it's a way to ease them into writing that component without too much stress. Because we are in stressful times now, and the summer session is usually shorter.
Mm.
It's 6 to 7 weeks, as opposed to the regular semester session, which would be 12 to 13 weeks. So
Okay.
you know that they are under a bit of stress.
Mm-hmm.
So that when you use and you introduce, the topic like that, they are not too stressed. They are exposed to the structure that is expected, and it helps them to use and focus on the what is required in terms of the jargon, or to get familiar with the academic literacy for the topic. And so as they start and ease in like this, then they don't feel that it's not something they could do or accomplish, and you get them moving forward confidently so that they could strive to to improve and do better, which actually happened.
Mm. Oh, speaking of what happened, how have students responded to the use of these templates and that you have been using in your class?
So it was a yes, it was very very well received. One student wrote me, he said, I really afterwards, I really enjoyed this class, I learned a lot, and I'm looking forward to an awesome grade. And actually their grades were awesome, because
Mm.
in the previous year when I did not use the sample script, I had it overall, there were 52 students in the class, and I had 26 A's and 20 B's. Some persons failed, and I had a few C's. This year, when I used the sample script, that's after I asked for the resubmission, and I continued that with the first part of the coursework. Overall, their grades improved tremendously. So I had 40 A's this time around as opposed to 26, and I had just 8 B's as opposed to 20 B's last year, and no one failed. No one failed. So it was really successful. It worked well with the students, and I can tell that they were quite pleased with their grades at the end of the
Mm.
day. because they had a good foundation. So when it came to the final assessment, I didn't have problems with them using the jargon and phrasing the different parts of their lesson plans according to what is expected. They had a basic grasp of the academic literacy for the lesson plan components and instructional design on the whole. Yeah.
So, what would you say to our viewers who resonated with what you have shared today, but perhaps they are thinking, I think that could work well for your course, but I don't think it could work in mine? What would be some first steps that they could take?
Okay. So if your students are having problems writing in the jargon of the subject, the academic literacy that is expected, or you're getting responses that indicate they're not too clear on what a term means or how to structure responses and so on,
Mhm.
I would definitely encourage you to use the sample script. You are only going to use this in a way to help students with their academic or their writing or academic writing, if that be the case, because that's how I started using it, referring to John Cresswell's sample scripts in his research text. Ease them into it in chunks when they have to focus on a specific concept in the content. You don't have to use it all the time, but it would be a good way to ease students into the topic or the subject content and help them to understand it, term by term or concept by concept, however you want to do it, so that they will have a good foundation. They would feel comfortable. You can tell from their responses that they're understanding what they're supposed to be doing. And then you build into more complex assignments and concepts. But that helps them to have a good foundation in the subject content. So I would encourage you. It has worked for me. You have seen. I have shared with you the results. Were very encouraging. So that this is how I would use it. It's not that you have to use it. It's not a must, but it's certainly an intervention that works to help students with their writing challenges.
Thank you. And are there any helpful resources that you would suggest that our viewers look at?
Sure. I can share my previous templates that I've used and sample scripts, and I will always also put the link in for Professor Questwell's text, which is, yes, it's online. So you can see this is not anything new. It has worked successfully for even graduate students.
Mhm. Great. And viewers, I will be sharing the link to those resources in the video description below. So please feel free to check those resources out. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Ferdinand, for sharing with us today. And viewers, I hope that you have been inspired and encouraged by these strategies that Dr. Ferdinand-James shared with us today. I encourage you also to share this conversation with others, and we look forward to seeing you in the next episode of this virtual summit. See you soon.